where Zuluness may be the center of loyalty and legitimacy. In an essay on nation-state, British author Anthony Peake writes, "There is a point in the history of each nation-state, where the national sense becomes sufficiently strong to demand that legitimacy be transferred from the external authority to the nation." And by the external authority, I refer to the little nationalisms that we all harbor. And he continues, in a nation state, that nationality is the source of legitimacy in its political system. Peake identifies various forms of states based on where loyalties are vested: the personal state, in which the primary loyalty was to a person, a king, or a tribal state with loyalty to a tribal authority. When there is the theocratic state, where loyalty is the rule of God through religious leaders. The nation state is where the primary loyalty is to the nation, not to a person, not to a tribal council. Now, writes Peake, to achieve this, there has to be a nationality that is a sense of unique national self-awareness, and that nationality has to be asserted. Now, if you read more of that Noluchungu write-up of 1992, it's funny when he refers to the Afrikaner tribe and all these other white tribes. When nationality is asserted, then there is common loyalty to the nation rather than loyalty to and legitimacy vesting in the separate identities that deny our common nationhood. Allow me to illustrate my point by reference to an episode that we all would like to forget. The horrific episode of July 2021 that shocked many South Africans into denial. This is not us. This is not South African. The reality was that this was us. This was the ugly South Africa that we had become. It still is our identity, as not much has changed in the factors that occasioned that episode. Yet it can be changed if we put our minds to it and embrace a different sense of self and infuse positive public values and societal accountability. The soul of the South African society could be built from the ashes of shame that we had witnessed. It is up to us, our country, our responsibility. It will take some doing, and I hope the people in this room would be up to the task. Following that shameful July 2 years ago, President Ramaphosa appointed an expert panel into the July 2021 unrest. We have been blessed to have two of those experts in the room in the last couple of days. It was chaired by Professor Sandy Africa, who was here yesterday. There may be somebody else in the room. But they produced a 154-page report. And the panel made some interesting observations that speak to the three themes of our three-day convening. For day one, the makings of a capable state, the report offered these three observations. It said, the need to stop corruption in government and start addressing the needs of the people kept being kicked down the road like the proverbial can. Secondly, they say, there are other manifestations of a culture of lawlessness in South Africa. The destruction of infrastructure, theft of steel, copper, and railways, which was brought into the public spotlight and has been happening to a greater or lesser extent over a long period now. The pilfering of fuel from the strategic supply lines, invasion of disused mines by illicit artisanal miners, zamazamas, the periodic blockading of national roads by disgruntled truck drivers, the illegal occupation of buildings by bullying municipal officials, or in some cases, collusion with them by business forums, undermining procurement procedures. These are all indications of how the authority of the state has been eroded without any visible plan to respond. This comes from the expert panel. Thirdly, they say, realizing this apparent incapacity of the state to deal with these challenges, many middle-class South Africans have resorted to hiring private security companies to guard their homes and businesses. Private security companies are also relied upon by government to protect government buildings and infrastructure, as it does not have sufficient personnel in the police service to address all its physical security needs. Now, addressing us at the beginning of this week, Ambassador Monica Juma warned that South Africa is grappling with a growing gap between aspirations and material reality of three fundamental elements that secure the prosperity of any nation. And she said, first one is governance, which speaks to the capability of the state governing infrastructure and ecosystem. Two, human development. Aspirations, interests of society embodying the material conditions of the people. C, security, defined broadly to encompass the totality of the enabling environment for the fulfillment of the aspirations of each citizen, culminating in the delivery of the welfare of the people and the well-being of the nation. And she said that this growing gap of aspirations of the people and the material, between the aspirations of the people and the material reality of these areas of governance, human development, and security, has generated a litany of concerns. And this list is similar to the one raised by the expert panel looking into the July 2021 unrest. Growing violent crime, rampant corruption, gender-based violence at an unprecedented level, failure of service delivery, lawlessness, mistrust of leadership, and impunity that prevails across society in both the public and private sector. And this is a Kenyan saying this. Dr. Juma drew the connecting line between a capable state, national interests, and security. For, as she put it, only capable states can help to define and clarify national interests and can secure those through the provision of an environment that enables their pursuit at individual and societal levels, and that guarantees their protection. Now, the Juma link between a capable state, national interest, and security is exactly what makes the expert panel report into the July 2021 unrest relevant for us in this conference. The first thing we may wish to do is to press for the full implementation of the Zondo Commission report and 3 security inquiry reports along with it. The first one is the Mufamadi Review Panel Report on State Security Agency. It has to be implemented to its fullest. The second is a panel of experts report on policing and crowd management established by the Minister of Police in terms of the recommendations of the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. The third is the Sunday Africa report of the expert panel into the July 2021 unrest. If nothing else, those 4 must be implemented. This, we believe, will go a long way to connecting the dots between a capable state, national interests, and security. But Dr. Juma further argues that the combination of ensuring a capable state as well as the protection of the national interests and also guarantee national security depends on the state's ability to generate resources and apply them effectively. This is the area of economic performance and the revenue generation through the tax system, and therefore the institutional capacity of the state to plug corruption and stem illicit financial flows. Above all of this, Dr. Juma adds to the package of solutions she has for us, and I quote, addressing challenges of exclusion, rising inequality, and accountability of leaders at all levels. And this is what we must be able to say we can ensure, and that is one of Dr. Monica Juma's remedies. However, a capable state requires engaged citizens with the values of mutual respect. Responsible citizens must make for a capable state that will not undermine the rights, should not undermine the rights of other people. They will not at will and with impunity choose to occasion public disorder, which is what we do a lot in this country. A capable state requires caring citizens. When a woman kills her children and then herself, the question should not only be to the organs of state, but also to the community in the midst of which the woman lives, the neighbors, the family, the extended family. And finally, a capable state needs responsible citizenry, making appropriate inputs in their community's integrated development plan, and monitoring the performance of their municipalities and relating closely with the constituency offices of their parliamentary representatives. If all of us coming out of here, we can go back and say, in where I live, I'll monitor the IDP. It will make a difference. Back to the 2021 expert panel report. The next two observations that the panel made relate to the business of our day two, an alternative economic architecture for the excluded majority. Government should pay close attention to the issues of poverty, underdevelopment, and inequality. While we accept that the issues are top of mind, there does not seem to exist a clear plan with budgets and a timetable to effectively address this matter, says the panel. It goes on and says, investments in development at the local level are therefore vital and in the spirit of distributed intergovernmental power. We urge you, Mr. President, to facilitate conditions and pathways for vibrant conditions for development at the level of local government. And they continue. In the words of one of the leaders of the faith-based organizations whom we met, I promise you it was not me. They never met me. It is time for South Africans to accept that those who have must share with those who do not. It is that simple, really. This is where Dr. Moliko's new wine strategic interventions come in. Industrialization as a key growth driver, institutions and macro. You know, you remember those 7 things that she said. I won't read them all. The highly commercial Tsendane Mbashe agriculture project comes into the third of the Moleko proposed interventions, domestic food production and rural development. The Tsendane model is a winner in part because it has the 15,000-ton storage facility enabling the farmers to hold their produce and sell when the price is good. Using the SAFEX and the Chicago Securities Market pricing, where just this week, the price I checked it last night, the price of yellow maize is at 3,865 rand per ton. As this average yield per hectare is 5 tons, this would mean a harvest of just under 20,000 per hectare. The silo storage also provides bankable value for their produce against which they can raise capital with the bank. A byproduct of the maize and soya production is a feed lot that takes 600 cattle at a time, supplying Beefmaster as a livestock market. This is a model that can be replicated for rural areas across the country. Now the point here is that our gathering must be inspired to look at options that we each can drive from the corners of our influence. One of the breakaway facilitators yesterday shared the Japanese manufacturing model where family units have the opportunity to participate in the car manufacturing by making or units or assembling various parts of the car. Now, as a local priest in Utrecht many years ago, I once approached the Volkswagen assembly plant to ask if they could let small groups in the township of unemployed people to assemble units that did not have to be assembled at the factory. The factory agreed to give us door locks, but this was torpedoed by the trade union leaders who opposed it as outsourcing, while it was an effort to share the pie with others who are also in need. This we can do today. Likewise, groups of people, youth, women, can bring back the textile industry by being contracted to supply uniforms to manufacturing industry, mining, prisons, and everywhere where the cloth can produce a work garment. Now, much has been said about youth unemployment. What stands in the way of a drive for a Marshall Plan for youth livelihoods that says in the next 3 to 5 years, we shall absorb 4 million young people, using a multiplicity of entry points? Likewise, a Marshall Plan for women livelihoods. Now, for a start, the South African Council of Churches will be approaching SAWID to partner on the case of women livelihoods, and likewise will request the youth in this group, those that were talking to us yesterday, to work with us to drive the prospect of a plan for youth livelihoods. This is to use every platform we can to include the excluded majority and eliminate poverty and reduce inequality. This is essential for a healthy nation state. The young people have reminded us to focus our efforts on the impacts of climate change. That too has economic opportunities. And now back to the expert panel report again. The next 4 observations relate to the business of this, our third day, the makings of a common nation with commitments of public values. The report says, I hope one of the authors of this report is not going to scream at me for abusing their report like this. The report says the responses to the violence in some communities exposed deep-seated racial prejudices and tensions, indicating that there is much to be done to achieve racial justice and greater social cohesion. Next, it says social cohesion and support programs, including solidarity networks that bridge the racial and class divides in society, must be supported by all social partners to ensure that there is accountability, restorative justice, and compensation of those who have suffered harm through the violence. And lastly, they say, thirdly, they say, vigilantism was one of the features of the chaos. The situation in Phoenix, Durban, took a terrible turn when self-styled community patrols harassed, victimized, and in 36 known cases, took the law into their own hands and killed innocent African people from neighboring townships, apparently in retaliation for the looting. Now, I want to testify here that the pain of Phoenix was ameliorated by the interfaith partnership of Hindu priests at Phoenix with the Inanda Local Ecumenical Action Network of the KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council. We worked together on this. We put it through. The Phoenix pain is a clear manifestation of loyalty and legitimacy vesting in the Indian subnationalism. A boy from Guamashu who had an Indian friend with whom he often stayed for weekends when they work on their common passion in the arts, took his brother with him to go to his usual Phoenix home, and they got accosted by these Phoenix vigilantes. And they were killed because they were different and didn't fit the racial loyalty and legitimacy of the presumed subnationalism for Phoenix. The last relevant observation of the expert panel report says, a final suggestion we want to make relates to reimagining the social compact and giving dignity to all. It cannot be that almost 3 decades into our democracy, there is still such deep racialized poverty and inequality in our society. Without an end to or a reversal of these conditions, listen to this, we will only see greater insecurity, which will require more diversion of resources to security. Now, we designed this convening such that we can together identify solutions in the making of a capable state, solutions to deal with the poverty of the excluded majority, but above all, to find common cause towards a common South Africanness, with you identifying the public values that should define our South Africanness, so that we can learn to say to a practitioner of corruption, hey, wena Malusi, what you are doing is un-South African. This is not done in South Africa, so that we can say to a drug dealer, to a fraudster, to a sex pest, to a bully, and so on, the same things. With values of integrity, hard work, respect for human person. Somebody was asking me to stop working at the corner yesterday, and I said, you know what? I was brought up by parents who said, if they saw you playing, they said, you're missing something to do. You must always work. Hard work, respect for the human person, beginning with yourself, such that there be things you will not do or say because of self-respect and the respect for the next person. Honor, respect, and protect the stranger and the sojourner in your neighborhood. These and similar values be those that we should like to identify to define the character of the South African person, and for which we should educate through our public broadcaster, our initiation schools, our religious education and formation, and our school system. If we have done anything in this convening this week, it will be to urge you to recognize the relationship between the capable state, an inclusive economy that denies abandoning people in abject poverty, and the common national one identity, South Africa. The poverty of the majority of South Africans that are excluded is no accident of history. It was a design that must be undone by embracing a common South Africanness and accepting the trade-offs necessary for a common nationhood. You will have to say what those trade-offs are. This is to persuade through conscientization and the build-up of different mental models of nationhood for people to embrace the common identity while retaining the dignity of their cultural and ethnic identity. This will reduce the loyalty demands of subnational ghetto and their politics in favor of national celebration in the national politics where the nation state is our joint heritage. Let us uphold the unique value of the Hindu, the Afrikaner and the Tswana, the Khoi and the San, the Italian and the Tsonga, the Tamil and the Zulu. Let them be beautiful adornments in the tapestry of the South African nation. And let us together share in the economy and together uphold the capable state that serves our collective interests rather than the current political pursuits for sectional interests. Let us cultivate the mindset for this. Now, Dr. Monica Juma refers to this mental emotional appropriation of the national identity as a national psychological infrastructure. She says, a critical component to this process is the reawakening of psychological infrastructure of our countries, not just here in South Africa, but across Africa. What we're witnessing lately in most African countries is the absence of an appropriate national psychological infrastructure. This is a mental orientation of citizens towards a collective, appropriate national identity that strongly influences the choices and actions of leaders and citizens. For blacks, by which was meant the so-called Africans, Indians, and so-called coloreds, Steve Biko referred to this as black consciousness and said that in time, when black and white are at ease with the equal worth of their humanity, this black consciousness must become national consciousness for all in what he called through integration. And so, he must then have the last word. We have set out on a quest for true humanity. And somewhere on the distant horizon, we can see the glittering prize. Let us march forth. With courage and determination, drawing strength from our common plight and our siblinghood collectively. In time, we shall be in a position to bestow upon South Africa the greatest gift possible, a more human face. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Bishop, for something to truly, truly think about and reflect. And as I had mentioned that on, to check your phones and your WhatsApp for the surveys so we can speak and give our collective opinion into that. The thing that stood out for me was when he said a common identity starts with self-awareness. And the thing about self-awareness, I had learned that when you are self-aware, it helps you regulate, to understand and regulate and know how then to move when you are self-aware. And it made me think, as we look at the issues of what's happening in our nation, what is our self-awareness of our contribution to the issues? An awareness of our contribution to the solutions. And I think it really does start with self. So thank you so much for that, Bishop. I want to apologize. I didn't do protocol. That should be observed. I'm aware that protocol, they usually start with like the highest honored and then go on the list. I'm going to do a list. You can decide if that is how it is. So the first people that I really would like to honor today, all the youth in the building. May we please just recognize you that are here. Your voice is heard. You are in this building, and they should know. My first, the youth. Oh, they're asking you to please stand. Please, the youth. Yeah, Baribapi, where are you? All the youth in the building. Thank you. We see you. We see you. Bishop wants to know if he can stand. If you're young at heart, I don't know. Is he welcome to the barbecue? They say you're not welcome to the barbecue. Secondly, I'd like to honor all the women in the building. You can please stand. Yeah? Yeah? Come on. Please stand. Come on. Yes, as a feminist, which truly means the equality of all the genders, I want to honor the men too, you know, to make sure equal, you know. We see you. Even the older ones. We see you. To all our guests that are here. And then, you know, if this takes me to HR, forgive me. I'd like to honor the former president that is here. I know you are number 4, I think, on my list. All the TIFSA leaders and all the staff and the team and everybody's here. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to have a Q&A. Oh, they welcome me. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Giving me up. Thank you. So we're going to have a Q&A very quick because of time. So what we're going to do is, if I may ask for each row, just 2, please. We're going to have another Q&A after the panel discussion. And if I may ask, if you've already spoken, in the spirit of sharing, can we please allow those that haven't spoken to please be by the mic? Only 2 per row, please. Please. So while you gather and decide, and if you want to give preference to the youth because their voice matters, I really want to, if we can please just get to the mics. And while they do that, there was just so much that I was thinking yesterday as the youth spoke, you know, about how their voice really does matter. I really hope as your chair you allow me to represent you today as a younging. But as Bishop was standing here, so, you know, I really have the honor of working with Bishop and learning so much, so much. And he shared something, I really hope I'm not in trouble for sharing this, but I remember him saying, Bishop was an activist back in his day, being close with those who have passed, even in their activism and post the fact. And I remember him saying he wasn't sure if he'd live past 30. That's how much the people he worked with and was being an activist for were dying for a cause of what they wanted. And that made me think, so if you weren't sure if you're going to live past 30, that means you were a youth doing this work. And now, so many years later, having started all of this, and it's to say, as the youth, we don't need to wait for a seat at the table. As to quote Tyler Perry, we can create our own table. Pandit Ashwin Chikamji himself was also an activist. And so I really also want to implore that let's learn from them. You know, when you really want to get something out of somebody, we're not going to get there by fighting. We need to develop that relationship. And while we have them here, let's have them as our advisors. Let's have them as the people that can help guide us. It really should be us in the front to start this thing, to start the movement. The change that we need needs to be radical. I don't know if Bishop still has that energy, but we do. You know, I mean, just in terms of we're going to jump on my fence, you know what I mean? But so as part of, you know, our country, our responsibility, not making this a talk shop, can I challenge the youth? How about we have our own convening? Call all the youth in the country and have a convening where we are saying, how are we going to take action? What are we going to do, and actually start that movement? So I really want to challenge, as we spoke yesterday and we're waiting for I want to challenge, if you can gather yourselves to say, next year this time or whenever, we're actually going to have our own, a room full of youth all over the country to say, actually, let us make this change. So think on that. You can come to me personally if you would like to have these advisors. I made such a public commitment, but I will commit to ask them to be like, please, you know, be part of our advising of that. Okay. So we do have the people, I did say 2 per row, and in the spirit of togetherness, I'm going to start that set. If we may have 2 questions, please. Can we please make it really less than a minute, as I said, that there is a time frame that we do have. Very, very short, please. Thank you.
Thokozani emakhosini lesedi obuamona king kukusala mina, can I speak Setswana and Zulu kaban ke tlo buela ba bonkoko ngizokhulumela abogogo. Ntate Bishop, my fellow pastors, le motho o tlholeng mo gare ga tulo, I'm a bit disturbed. Kapilo ebutlhoko, we were invited here. Biana ka di zangoma, ba profeti, amagedla, ababelethisi bendabuko, le bontate ba tsamaisang bashimane ko thabeng. But we were not recognized. Harafiwa tulo gore batho bo botle. Actually, hona le batho ba sa itseng gore go phahla ke eng ka mo gare ga tulo. So hana go bitswa baruti fale mo pele, we were supposed to be called. Re tshele snaifi ka bana we know gore a re khone tshesa mphepa ka mo gona le dilo tsa metsi, but we were supposed to be called. Re tsentho e re itseng le rona, re tshele snaifi, re betse bonkoko le bontate mogolo, re phaphate matsogo, re khuname ka mangwele, but we were not called. Ke a kopa tle next time le re bitseng re etse se go tshwanetseng gore re setse le rona re ba Africa. Dankie, ke a leboga.
Thank you very much. Are we good there? Next row, please. Thank you.
Angithatha ithuba okokuqala ngibingelele umuntu abonge izethulo esezenziwe usihlalo phambi kwethu. Nginguthusi, ngingowase Escort kwaZulu Natal. Kukodwa engifisa ukusho emva kwezethulo zikasihlalo, amakhosi neinduna basaqhubeka bayafa kwaZulu Natal. Ukubulawa kwabantu emahostela kuyaqhubeka kuyenzeka kwaZulu Natal. Ukubulawa kwamakhansela azisebenzi zomphakathi kuyaqhubeka kuyenzeka. Izimpi zezigodi phecelezi the tribal battles do continue to happen in our province. Angusho futhi ukuthi ukuxoshwa kwabantu bakithi abakhe emaplazini lokesithi ama-farm evictions kusenzeka. Ukuboshwa noma ukimpoundwa kwemfuyo yabantu bakithi emaplazini siyakubona kuyenzeka. Ey'ndaweni ezinye lapha abantu bakithi bekhona abakwazi ukudla, abakwazi ukugeza, imfuyo iyafa ngoba amanzi awekho. sifisa ukuthi sinqoma ukuthi kwenzeke lokho okulandelayo. The continuous mediation and intervention by the faith sector. Okwesibili, to intensify security in our places. Okwesithathu, our people must have access to land. Ukuze bakwazi ukulima, bakwazi ukuphila ngenzuzo abayithola ngokusebenza umhlaba. Ama project omphakathi sithi mawalekelelwe uhulumeni ukuze axoshe indlala adale namathuba emisebenzi kubantu bakithi. Siyafisa ukubona i-integration yabantu abasha ebuholini bomphakathi ukuze kutholakale amasu amasha azolekelela ukwakha isizwe. Akufakwe imali ethe xaxa kwezolimo kuthuthukiswe nemboni yezemkhiqizo ukuze sikwazi ukuphila. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you. You know, we're speaking of a capable state. It also requires us, you know, to be governable citizens and citizens that follow the law. I did say, please, guys, 2 per row. I know that we have questions. We really don't have time. I'm so sorry, but I will ask if we can have another session. As I say, there is another Q&A session, which will have more time, hopefully then. So please, can we just have 2 per row? You can have me afterwards, but I really just want to follow instruction and make sure that we don't lose out and get kicked out. There is a question at the back.
Yes. Thank you, Chairperson. I was very fascinated by the way you summarized the speech of Bishop Mpumlwana in saying that the common identity starts with self-awareness, how we contributed to the issues, how we can contribute to the solutions. For me, that is true human revolution. For me, that speaks to us being the change that we want to see. In this country, everybody's blaming each other, and yet our country continues to go down. So I would like to appeal to this faith-based conference, interfaith-based conference, that we start changing the narrative from all our pulpits to tell people that be the change you want to see. The human revolution is about exactly what Bishop Mpumlwana was saying on that podium. We appeal that the narrative start changing in those pulpits. I believe that during apartheid, the pulpits were somehow in support of that system. I believe that we can do better in the pulpit and support our democracy and stop blaming our leaders and take responsibility for our country to go forward. My name is Lozizwe Mdlalose. I represent the Buddhist organization in South Africa, SGI. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I did say 2 per section and we only had 1 there. So with the next one, please.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, South Africans, the leaders of South Africa. My concern and question is to my bishop. I'm not fighting you, sir, but it's just a concern. We are the traditional house, the royal house in South Africa. I'm still saying I'm Princess Elsie Mbunjane, who serves under Amandebel Traditional Council. Say, we really want to be part of this because it concerns us what is happening in South Africa. But in your listing of the people that you will be part of, I didn't hear, or maybe I didn't hear, mentioning the traditional councils of South Africa. That is ubukhosi be South Africa or amakhosi. I mean inkosi chieftaincy in that regard. Thank you, sir. I'm also a pastor, but can we please be part of this? Because it's hurting us, it concerns us in our communities. We are dealing with people, amakhosi aphethe abantu e South Africa. And whatever goes wrong, abantu bezema ezinkosini. So sicela by part of this summit or conference. Enkosi tata.
Thank you. I'm going to re-emphasize, ngiyacela, please, 2 per section. Can we please have Uma? Again, there is a survey. Please, your responses are really being read. The leaders are really going to have them. And if there are specific questions, they will answer. So please, please, please respond to the surveys for your responses or questions or comments. And again, if we can please keep it short, very quick. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, all. In the Bible, it says that all of us are created in the image of God. What has concerned me is the comments that I've had to hear from politicians, and even more sadly from some of the delegates that have engaged here. I've been on the ground for over 31 days at the Marshalltown fire in Johannesburg, where we've lost 80 plus people have died in that fire. And the narrative that has come out through that fire is there are foreign, illegal, undocumented people in that building. The reality is, being on the ground, we actually get to count the bodies and count those who have survived. And I can confidently tell you the majority of people in that building were South Africans. The reason I bring this up is because despite the fact that we're having things like load shedding, non-existent rail system caused by corruption, all these institutions are run by South Africans, yet the blame is being put on foreign national people who have crossed man-made borders. When people start to say the health system has failed, they say it's because we have too many foreigners in the system. The health system has failed, for example, because we've assassinated a person like Babita Deokaran, who was a whistleblower and exposed 1 billion rand of corruption in Tembisa Hospital alone. She was assassinated by South Africans. My point is, what has been lacking in this conference is, as much as we talk about cohesion and we talk about our brothers and sisters in Africa who housed many of those people who were in exile, who were persecuted and killed by the South African government, we're now pushing people away only because they've crossed man-made borders. My appeal today is to please look at the facts and the contribution of foreign nationals, because they are contributing. And the second one is, let's focus on corruption. And that's mine. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, if I may ask you to please make it very, very, very quick.
Thank you. When talking to solutions, have we addressed trauma that each one has faced, having to deal with the change that has happened in South Africa since 1994? Has the label of apartheid been addressed for both sides of what happened? So self-healing, people dealing with the trauma that has been caused in self and being able to heal that makes us all better citizens. And when we are kind and loving to self, we can do well. The other part that I would like to see changed is, why do we still carry things that have been handed down to us? Why do we still have the 4 race groups? In looking at a common identity, how about South Africans and non-South Africans on all documents instead of the 4 different race groups. I would like to see that change. Namaste.
Thank you, ma'am. Over here.
Thank you. My name is Haley Fudu. I'm wearing many hats today: Religions for Peace South Africa, the Baha'i Faith, and the Faith Action to End Gender-Based Violence. I wanted to just take a moment to say to dear Bishop and to the forum that we commend you on bringing this massive group of humanity working in the faith sector together. It is a huge undertaking, and I know and I feel it in my heart that anybody who was excluded, it was accidental. I feel that strongly, because every time we came to Bishop and said, oh, what about the Buddhist? They added the Buddhists. When the Khoisan were like, what about us? We want to pray. They added them. So there's no intention to exclude anyone in this space, and I feel that this forum really is all of our forum. Religions for Peace is here to offer its assistance if you need any. And I think that I wanted to just say it's wonderful the idea of an interfaith youth convening as well. But dear friends, if we are going to sustain this interfaith work, we need to really look at the micro neighborhood level. And if we can do that and work together as friends of faith at the neighborhood level, and then come together when we can, when these massive efforts can be organized, it's wonderful. But we have to understand that the true change is going to happen on the ground with each of us working with our neighborhoods. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Bishop.
much. Thank you.
Good morning, guests, and thank you, Chairperson. My name is Zintle Twala from 3C Church, and just 2-3 quick points towards Bishop, and thank you so much for that address, and we agree that morality needs to be at the forefront of what we are trying to do to take responsibility for our nation. So suicide is on the rise amongst young people, and faith-based institutions are being minimalized in schools and institutions of higher learning. In the 80 high schools that we're involved in, there has been a teen suicide every week for the past 12 weeks. And the fact is that the school system does not know what to do about it, and they need the faith-based organizations to be involved. One of the female leaders in a female residence at the University of Pretoria was disciplined for typing a message on one of the res groups, which she shared or started off by saying, "Good day, ladies," because not everyone identifies as a lady or a woman in that specific residence. So the question is, what leg do we have to stand on to continue empowering the youth within schools and universities when faith-based institutions are being minimalized and thus stifling the morality that Bishop Mpumlwana talks about? Secondly, I've been attending the conference since Monday, and I need to ask, from my point of view, what tangible, practical message am I taking back to the youth that I lead about this very conference? Do we need to have our own conference like Ms. Matumi is saying, or am I regurgitating the information that was shared? What do I need to go back, or where do I need to point the students that we currently lead? Third and final point before I hand over to the next questions. Possible solutions. The youth do lack discipline. So conscription was ended in 1994, which was the year that I was born in. And conscription compelled every young person before going into the world to give a year of service to their country and learn discipline and service to an institution that doesn't directly benefit them. Today, the graduates that I'm working with are not looking to work in the state, and they lack the discipline and the respect that they need to build the country that we want to see. So could we not, and this is another question, not only to Bishop Mpumlwana, but all the other speakers that will be coming on, could we not redefine conscription and compel the youth to rebuild some of the failed state government's entities that are out there, like the MBCH students that have practical learning in government hospitals and clinics from 3rd year. They graduate in 6th year and are still compelled to work a further 3 years before being able to practice independently. This equates to a minimum of 6 years for every MBCHB student before they work in these government hospitals. Would it work to create a similar pathway to feed directly into failed entities, where we take these learned students and feed them into your PRASAs, into your SAAs, before they go out and work independently? I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Bayete,
Bayete.
bayete,
Bayete.
bayete,
Bayete.
Kamako. Pula. Pula. Horeb. Spotted one. Amase. Kaises. Yeah, this is South Africa, by the way.
Yes, sir.
Undaba ezethu amabheka phezulu ukhumalo umuntu ngombulasi wadla umuntu abangendaba. From Amantunga Royal Kingdom, Nago South African Royal House Organization. Wamumbuzo olula kakhulu nje phela. Bengicela ukwazi mgcini isihlalo ukuthi kule conference enhle kangaka enkulu kangaka. Namhlanje we are going to make a statement which will regard as our manifesto. And I should believe that when we are going to be approached by political parties, when they come to us, Bazo presented their manifesto, we are going to give them our manifesto as a church. But I want to know, Guti, what are we going to do with this manifesto? I believe that this conference is not going to be one of the talk shops that we've been having all these years. Sinikeza bani masuka la le manifesto le, and si expecte impendulo after how many days? And if nothing is happening, what is going to happen? What actions are we going to take as a church? And I should believe that the church is the only institution in the globe that has got so much power that is feared, because the power we have received from God himself. So what are we going to use? I mean, what are we going to do with this power? If those people that you are going to give this manifesto are not going to listen to us, we need to have a plan of action. If the church has got the power to lead this country back to God. Bayete.
Bayete. Thank you, sir.
South Africa, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Thomas Wagwazulu Undabezita. I'm a 19-year-old and I come here to stand to be the voice of the youth. Ever since I've graduated from my matric, the government has not supported me that much. I'm not gonna mention the 350 because it's not something tangible. So my question, even though I don't know who to direct it, but I know someone who is in power will be touched by that question. Since I've graduated matric, I've been supported by NGOs. So my question is, what are you doing to support NGOs, to empower NGOs, because they are also working from grassroots. They are the ones who support the youth more than the government, from my perspective. The NGOs and NPOs support the youth more than the government. I'm still an amateur in public speaking, but the NGOs have empowered me to be able to talk in front of people like how I am talking in front of you all today. I have financial literacy skills because of an NGO. I have computer literacy skills because of an NGO. And that NGO is running without funding. but they still do their best to push. So my question is that what are you doing to empower those NGOs to support them, grassroots NGOs? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the last two, the last row, please.
Chair, I was in the line when they were, and you can attest, there were people here who were saying that I was here. So I'd like to speak. It's a short proposal only.
Okay.
The proposal is that you mentioned you'd like to engage more young people, and that you put forward a suggestion of convening young people again.
Yes.
I don't want us to duplicate any initiatives already undergoing in civil society. And so there are representatives here in this room from the National Youth Coalition, made up of over 150 organizations and many more. There is plans to work towards a national youth convention similar to this in February next year. And I call on the leadership of the Interfaith Forum to engage that leadership so that we can combine the efforts and ensure that there's broader representation that exists within that forum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Felicia. I'm from FG Wellness Foundation and a delegate of Young Sawid. So I would like to bring awareness to the challenges of the youth within the home. It's extremely important for us to be aware that youth is really affected by intergenerational trauma, and we are carrying this. And firstly, I would like to give recognition that we honor and respect the fight that has been happening, to help us through apartheid. We value that, we honor that as well, and we recognize that many times we're faced with being drawn back. When we want to move forward, we're reminded about, listen, you don't understand what we went through. And I'm standing here to say we might not fully understand, but we respect and we honor and we're thankful for the fight that you fought for us, and to bring us where we are so we can fight against other different challenges that we are experiencing currently, which is the increase in teenage pregnancies. It is online addictions amongst our young people. Young people are being raised in child-headed homes, in homes without fathers present, and all of these things are affecting our generation. So what I would like to encourage and bring awareness to, there is a lot of representatives of organizations, faith-based as leaders that can drive change. When we choose to heal individually, things around us heal. So I'd like to encourage you, to heal on a personal level from anything that happened in your past, because we're finding so much projection amongst our young people, towards our young people, whether careers, whether certain initiatives, whether change, it is being stopped that you don't understand, you're just a child. And I've learned personally, when I speak to 14-year-olds, I learn so much from them. I don't think wisdom has an age, because we're all in different sectors. And it's to come to a place where we listen to one another. We as young people want to learn from the older generation. We don't want to make the same mistakes. We like feedback, but we'd also like to alter it. And we'd also like to share with you what we're going through and how we see the world today. And as Sawid, we had a conversation about allowing young people to stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. So I'd like to encourage in each organization, allow the young people to stand on your shoulders, to learn from you, but also to alter the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Stian van der Merwe. I am related to Kairos Palestine South Africa group. We are standing in solidarity with Palestine, and in particular the Christian community in Palestine. That Christian community that Christian community didn't become Christians. They are also the descendants of the first Christians. Chair, and through you, I would also like to thank the presence of the senior citizens in this convening, and not only others that are mentioned. I would like to add that to your vote of thanks as well.
Thank you, sir.
Bishop Mpumlwana and others, I would like to comment a few things on what was shared also during this convening and in your presentation. First of all, we talk about poverty and inequality. I am asking, why are we not talking about opulent wealth? Why are we not resisting opulent wealth? Why are we not praying for the opulent wealthy? And I want to share one example. During what we call the COVID times, a certain South African whose wealth is measured, personal wealth is measured at 27 billion rand, generously gave 1 billion of his wealth to South Africa for the purposes that was there at the time. However, the taxi driver was asked and forced to give away, donate for that matter, 50% of his or her ride due to social distancing in taxis. Why could that person not offer us 13.5 billion rand for the purposes that we had? And that is the kind of discrepancies and inequalities also that we have seen, per example. Secondly, I would like to ask, in the discussions about the economy, I appreciate the presentation with all the information and advice and future structures or architecture of economy. What happened to the moral, ethical discussions in the economy? Why are we not holding the economy also to account for pursuing very clearly presented and agreed moral values? Now, when we talk about moral values in business, and for that matter everywhere, I'm not talking about having codes of ethics. Chair, the codes of ethics are something like pornography. Let me explain. Pornography is, namely, what you see is what you don't get. Can we focus our minds, please?
Thank you. Yes, sir, please continue.
Thank you. The last point about social values, all faith communities, the core of faith communities is the spiritual principle and value of love. Why are we not talking about that also in the economy and in our politics, rather than fighting each other as if we are enemies? And when we talk, therefore, of a national identity, let us understand that national identity is not against any other national identity. Our identity is a gift to the world, and we must understand it. And so it goes for also all the identities that were mentioned. And I come to this also from Palestine. We have seen in our TV screens what is happening in that part of the world now. The Christians prophetically shared their vision, and this is my last point, and just quickly quote that. In 2009 already, in living under an apartheid that we cannot fathom in terms of our own history, they say, love is to see the face of God in my enemy. Can you see this in your TV screens? That is the challenge of love. It is not a Valentine's Day kind of event. It has that challenge. And their vision for the Holy Land, where Palestinians and Jews need to live together, is, their vision is, hear me, a new land and a new human being capable of loving his or her and his neighbors as brothers and sisters. A luta continua, victory is certain.
Thank you. I will now allow the Bishop to respond very briefly. We do have a next set of Q&As after the panel, and I do want to emphasize again, please, we have created a platform for everyone to share your questions and your comments, and we will respond. It is, please, if you haven't received it, please ask the team at the back for the survey link, and they will be attended to. I'd now like to hand over to Bishop to just give us a quick response.
Thank you. Most of the inputs were actually very important comments rather than questions for me to respond to. I think I do have the responsibility to respond to Ugogo, who complained about not being invited. I think it really was nothing to slight the traditional healers. But when the Interfaith Forum planned and prepared for this, they deployed people from their members to lead the prayers as conveners, because the Interfaith Forum are the conveners. And so that was really, it was not even about any discrimination. And I apologize for slighting that was caused by this. But I also should like to take the opportunity to acknowledge Amakosi, because the chair of the day raised everybody up, but they did not raise Amakosi. And Amakosi, you're supposed to say, Bayete. And that was not done. So I'm saying Bayete on behalf of the chair. Thank you very much. Dr. Van der Merwe, you would always ask the question that a southpaw would ask. Why we're not condemning the obscenely wealthy. I suppose it's because our focus has always been on bringing people out of poverty. You are telling us that the way to bring them out of poverty is to do the other thing. And I can say that, as far as I'm concerned, it means there must be trade-offs that must be made. There will be something that need to be given up by those who are wealthy. And that's why I said in my conversation here, I expect that we will identify those trade-offs. And so please, Stian, start naming the trade-offs so that we can work with them. The pain of suicide for young people is really the pain of mental health in our society, which runs very deep. We did a study through the Human Sciences Research Council on the status of family in our society. And the academics told us that their research says that only 38% of South African families have got both parents living with them. And it's most likely either the mother or even the child head at home. And you can imagine the amount of stresses that people have to go through in that environment. And that is the majority of South Africans. And so the matter of mental health is a matter that needs serious attention. And maybe, there was many years ago, the psychologist, Professor Shabani Manganyi, published a book, very small book, says, Being Black in the World. It was talking about all the woes of living. The director of Black Community Programs at that time was Dr. Ben Huapa. He said, this book tells us that every family in this country needs to have mental health support. That has gone worse than it was in 1973. So I wouldn't like to take more time except to say the people that I will be saying much more intelligent things are coming up, and they'll be given very little time because there isn't the time. But we are going towards identifying what needs to be done. So questions have been asked here. What are we taking away? We're taking away what you have given us, which is why we keep asking, what are you giving us? Because that's what we're going to take away. Is that right? Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. I'd like to make an agreement with everyone in the room because I know there must be some eyes that don't like me anymore. Because we are really running almost an hour over time, can we have a working coffee break, a tea break, where you are free to go out and get your coffee and come back if needs be, so that we have more time for Q&A after the panel? Is that okay? So we can go straight to the panel? Can we do that? Happiness. So if I may please call up the panel group. First, the facilitator, Mr. Lukhona Mguni, and then Ms. Felicity Harrison, Prophet Farid Isak, Pandit Ashwin Trikamji, and Prof. Charlene Swartz to please come to the stage. And as they come, I really would want to share, and I just have a hope that the purpose and intention of this convening is not missed. The reason for this was to say that faith leaders have said they do not have all the answers and they may not have all the capacity themselves to implement the change we need. So let's call everyone to say, what are we going to do to craft the solutions? So the reason for those surveys, they're going to take that to craft what the so what is. But if the expectation is that the faith leaders are going to action this, so you may come, the faith leaders are going to action this by themselves, it is how it ends up being a talk shop. If everybody in this room goes home and waits just for the faith leaders to take action, it's how it ends up being just a talk shop. It is all of us to say, in our areas of influence, in our areas of network, how can we make the change on all levels of society? So as you ask the question, this is our list of demands, the question to ask is, what are you going to do about it? The faith leaders, as they leave, are going to take that statement to see what they can do in their spaces, but in the spirit of self-awareness, how are we self-aware to say, okay, this thing that I need, what can I do in this space to help that collective movement? Even if it's in the small, biggie mat buyer, and then collectively, we can do a lot more. So there is a little bit of shuffling. I believe that the panelists are getting mic'd as we get ready. So if we can just have a quick break, we'll just wait for them to come, and then we'll go straight into the panel. If I may suggest, if you haven't answered the survey, if you can please check your phone, put the comments there. And as Bishop had mentioned, everything that came from the breakaway rooms, the suggestions that were made, those are what the outcomes are, and they are collating them. They will be read and shared with the room for agreement to say that this is the collective agreement of the outcomes of the solutions that are needed. And the plea or the ask will be for everyone to take it into their spaces and see how they can action those together and in their own. Thank you very much. We'll just wait for the panel group. Put on the mic. Okay. Hello. I'm good. How are you?
So we don't have updated bios for the other.
So I'm not. If you notice, I haven't read bios. I'm not reading bios because it's also taking time. Yeah. So I'll just introduce.
then we proceed. So I needed to make the apology for Farid Desak. Thank you.
Skip. They're saying, should we just start? Because people are saying.
I think so. Let me just do the last.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, we are going to get started. We are really pressed for time today. So we're going to get started. Those who are outside will join us when they're ready. If I may ask if the doors, just for now, can be closed so that the noise doesn't interfere once it's more settled. We can then open them again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to our panel, who will be discussing the makings of a common nation with commitments of public values. Our facilitator is Mr. Lukhona Mnguni, and he is with Ms. Felicity Harrison and Pandit Ashwin Trikamji. They will be having their discussion, and then we will have the rest of the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matume, and a very good morning to everyone here today. Where I come from, they say Nganga Nensi Bazayo as a way to say protocol is observed. And because it's church and faith-based leaders, I am avoiding missing a lot of people. Greetings in the church where I go can go on for 30 minutes. Because when ulibele umvangeli, you must remember mamuno Bible no mvangelikazi, and it's a bit too much. The beautiful thing is that I can promise you we shall keep to time, because all the people here on stage, including myself, have flights to catch around 1 o'clock or 1:30. So we will keep to time. I just want to quickly say before I give over to my panelists that this discussion we are engaged in today is not for a lack of trying, but it is a demonstration that there is something at the heart of our society that just struggles to find solutions to long-standing questions and debates. And we've probably got to ask ourselves, what is it about us that struggles to find solutions? It was 25 years ago in Parliament when the discussion on nation building was held. At the time, the now former was actually still deputy president in 1998, when serious questions were raised about who we are and his characterization. Then former President Mbeki said, a country of two nations. And it's an analogy and an analysis that continues to come up. Whether you go to writings in 2018 when we were 20 years away from that time, whether you go to writings in recent time, and whether you look at the census. I just had a chance to peruse and browse some of the outcomes of the census 2022, and really does continuously paint this picture of one nation that has its material conditions with access to a developed economy, physical, educational, communication, and other infrastructure. But you still have that second and larger nation that was characterized back in 1998 that is, lives under conditions of a grossly underdeveloped economic, physical, educational, communication, and other infrastructure. And you just have to look at the depopulation of certain provinces and the growth of the province of Gauteng. I mean, in provinces such as the Eastern Cape, people no longer feel that they have, a life. Now, I know that somebody during the Q&A and discussion with Bishop Mpumlwana challenged our categorization. At that time, the more affluent nation was categorized as this, white, and the larger nation as black and poor. Now, we've got to then ask if we even have consensus on the parameters of our discussion when we talk about a nation building and the making of a common nation. Because if we don't have common parameters of the kind of discussion we should have and how we characterize the discussion, perhaps we will never find an answer to this issue, and we will continue to remain in the place where we talk about these things, but they actually do not make sense to us. And I'm going to take from a book of somebody who thought of breaking
It's okay. We need to be able to live in the discomfort that there will be people who will think differently to us. But how do we treat them with respect and dignity, and how do they treat us with respect and dignity? We are also a deeply polarized world, and we need to find ways to listen to each other and to understand each other. This is an endeavor which will require all of us, citizens, governments, religion, faith, business. We are all in this together. Democracy relies on cooperation between government and citizens. But I'm sorry to say that the government is not coming to save us. At the moment, it can't even keep the lights on. We have to use our agency ourselves. We have to ensure that business is a good corporate citizen. We need to ask ourselves what that looks like, but the cost of doing business cannot be extractive. Business must contribute to the common good of all South Africans. And just in closing, part of the data that we've produced has said that 3 out of 4 South Africans believe that being South African is a very important part of their identity, and they want to have their children to have this a part of identity. So I think this is something that we really need to work on. There's so much that we can be proud of. We are a resilient nation. We are a committed nation to the values of things like Ubuntu. Most South Africans live good, honest lives, and we need to make sure that that majority is the majority that is felt in everyday life. But perhaps the most important public value that we need to have is hope. And I'm going to just close on one of my favorite quotations, which says that hope is not resignation. It is a commitment to continue the struggle, even when things seem to warrant surrender. When hope flares, it allows human beings to overcome monstrous difficulties. It allows people to defy common sense and confound strategists. Hope, experienced in the extreme, like faith and love, is miraculous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Felicity. I will ask a question, though, and then move on. And my question, particularly because of the gathering we are in, the interfaith community, and you speak about, in answering this question of where do we derive these values from, and then, you refer to the Constitution, and you say the values in the Constitution have not failed. Perhaps some of us have failed to live up to them. But the interfaith community itself, at times by society, is seen as failing to achieve the values in the Constitution, and whether it's through recognition of gay and lesbian marriages, and or women fighting for a space within churches to be recognized as acquiring full citizenship within the church, as men, insofar as being made whether pastors or bishops and so on. How would you navigate that space of the interfaith community? Because some people who are aggrieved in that space turn to our courts. And our courts, because of the attempt to separate the church from the state, defers to doctrine of those churches. And sometimes that doctrine does not, advance the values of the Constitution. And just lastly, some people were even offended when a Chief Justice knelt down and prayed in Parliament. And so how do we navigate this, need to keep the independence of the interfaith community, at times even if it has jarring responses to values of the Constitution, and still say, in a gathering of this nature, the values of the Constitution is what could bind us?
As a Catholic, I think you're asking me a very difficult question.
I didn't know.
Yes. But I think let's start with the separation of church and state. I think that I'm going to turn to St. Paul, where he says we're different parts of the same body. I think that we do need to make sure that when we have a state that respects religions, it also doesn't encompass religion. I think that as South Africans, we saw the danger danger of conflating religion and state during the apartheid era. And I think that we need to be very careful that where we do have states and religions, that we don't prescribe to people one religion and that no one religion dominates. And so I do think that we need, it needs very careful negotiation. I think when it comes to religion and how that is mediated within a state, I think I've got two answers to that. One is that I do believe that it is incumbent on people within those religious communities to take up the fight themselves and to change from within. I think that that is vitally important. We have to create the communities that we want to see. And if you're in a faith community, as I am, where it has been discrimination on a broad range, that it is incumbent on those who are in the religion to do the change. I also do think that we get on a very slippery slope when we start saying that government can force certain changes within religions. And I think that the same applies for culture. Yeah. I think that if you are talking about religion and culture, I think that there should be a very careful conversation. I'm going to sit on the fence on this one and give a very probably unsatisfactory answer and say that this needs to be mediated. I think that the state where there are rights that are being contravened needs to encourage, perhaps not coerce, but encourage the living up to the values. But there needs to be a negotiation between the states and either cultural leaders or religious leaders. But this is, not an answer I'm sure is satisfying to everyone.
It's godly enough. Pandit Ashwin Trikamji, your opening remark.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning, sisters and brothers. I didn't hear anybody say anything. Good morning, sisters and brothers. I think that since Monday morning, you've heard so many different opinions, both from speakers who made presentations, as well as from contributions made by yourselves. And I'm in the unfortunate position that I'm speaking last in this conference. So what I'm going to say, or a lot of what I'm going to say, has been somewhat covered by many of the contributions that have been made. But nonetheless, I feel it's very, very important that I say what I want to say. And for me, the entire world was faced with one of its major challenges when we had a pandemic called COVID. And it's amazing how we as people behaved in response to the pandemic. For the first time in our lives, all of us were house arrested. For the first time in our lives, we realized, if we never did in the past, that there are communities out there that our fellow citizens in South Africa who were battling to find a meal for themselves. And what happened is faith communities became extremely philanthropic in their endeavor to assist. And the kind of efforts that took place during COVID and post-COVID, to me, has been something exceptional in South Africa. And, as much as we criticize the faith communities, which I'm going to do just now in more detail, we must acknowledge that the faith communities were quite magnificent in their response to assisting their fellow citizens in South Africa during the time of COVID and post-COVID as well. According to our scriptures, whenever adversities arrive and people are faced with challenges, they turn to the divine. I think that is almost a given in all societies. All of us turn to the divine when we are in trouble. We don't pray every day, and that's not necessarily good or bad. But when we have got challenges in our lives, then all of us are there at the temples, at the mosques, at the churches, at the synagogues, and so on, seeking the assistance of the divine to deal with the challenges that we have. And what we have been talking about for the last 2 days is nothing common. Poverty, inequality. These are challenges which have been here for a long time, even before apartheid. But nothing has changed, as has been the common comment since 1994. So we as faith leaders, and for the last 2 days I have, like all of you, witnessed the kind of pointing fingers in a direction, and that was the common victim, as it were, was the government. We were blaming politicians. We constantly blame politicians. We blame the cancer of corruption at the door of the politicians. But let's look at ourselves as faith leaders. I mean, let's look at the corruption within the faith community as well. And here, we're not perfect, right? We have a fair number of, I would call them charlatans amongst us, especially those who are self-appointed, unaccountable, right? And they fool the poor with ridiculous sleight of hand tricks, right? And primarily focus on their weekly takings. We've seen of recent our own people, our faith brothers, who are now leading lives. Somebody mentioned, I think Dr. van der Merwe mentioned, opulence. Well, I think there are faith leaders who also fall in that category. Faith leaders who are now driving the most exotic motor cars, having bodyguards accompanying them wherever they go. Some of them enjoy the kind of lives that presidents enjoy. So what are we going to do about that? We need to have an introspection as well. It's all very well for us to point fingers at others. And then the faith leaders are somewhat in the dock to question, for questioning. All of us have congregations. I have a congregation, you have, and each week in and week out, you preach to your congregation. But in our congregations, we have the very same people that we are criticizing, those politicians, those people whom we call corrupt, the people whom we blame for the lack of basic human services in this country. We've reached a point where electricity and food, which are basic human requirements, have now become a challenge in this country. And yes, we are quite correct in criticizing the people who are in charge, but they come to our congregations and they sit there, and some of us are so good in our endeavor that we give them the front row. And many faith organizations, and I'm aware of this personally, many faith organizations determine who's going to sit in the front row depending on how much money they contribute. And that money is tainted money, most of the time. So we need to do, for me today, I really think that we need to also do an introspection of ourselves. Let's not just sit here for a day and a half or 2 days, criticize everybody else for what's happening, when so much is happening within us. And for me, the key to all these problems that we have been discussing is in our hands. Because we as faith leaders have direct contact with our congregations, which is the community. We are dealing with them on a weekly basis. We can bring about change. But instead of bringing about that change, like I said, we are indulging in practices which are somewhat, we've got to accept this, we are somewhat encouraging it. So for me, Mr. Chairman, I think the big challenge is an introspection followed by the question was why? What are we going to do? Well, I've said this and I'm repeating. We are the people that preach. We are the people that have direct contact with society. We have no political affiliations or political colors. Therefore, welcome. I'm glad that you're safe. That we are, therefore, we have the tools in our hand to bring about that change. All the different proposals, fantastic proposals that have been made, some extremely constructive and well-made proposals that we've heard for the last 2 days. Let's use our offices as faith leaders to bring about that change. And that's what this conference is about. What can we as faith leaders do to bring about the change? And my view is that as faith leaders, we preach to the congregation week in and week out, we can bring about the change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pandit Trikamji. I mean, you are delving into, does the interfaith community itself still have the ability to exercise moral leadership in society? Because but you start off with the COVID-19 pandemic, and I want to pick up there, because my sense is that we were able to have this nationwide, global-wide, multi-sectoral response to COVID-19 because suddenly there was serious mutual vulnerability. The cleaner could catch it as much as the CEO could catch it, and the CEO could have more comorbidities than the cleaner and would probably die quicker than the cleaner and so on. Now, that kind of mutual vulnerability for me is extremely important. What would you identify today in our society as that type of mutual vulnerability that we probably could all coalesce around?
Well, that mutual vulnerability is what we're talking about. The complaint of every South African today, and that's the mutual vulnerability that could be analogized to the COVID challenge, is that we've heard it. We don't have basic needs. We don't have water. We don't have electricity. And poverty. I mean, we're all talking about poverty. You know, and so many of us in different organizations and what have you are doing our bit by addressing poverty, by handing out food parcels, food vouchers to people and so on. So that to me brings people together. And somebody mentioned in the course of the last 2 days social cohesion. When the pandemic challenge came about, there was complete social cohesion. There was no such thing as in the hospital, who was in hospital, who required, what do you call them, ventilators and so on. It was our resolve to help everybody. The medical profession came together. You know, they were working, some of them were working 24 hours a day attending. So that challenge is there. When a common challenge is there, society gets together. We as South Africans, before 1994, all of us were fighting one cause, and we were all fighting to remove apartheid. We were fighting against apartheid. We all had a common enemy, as they say. So why can't we now work in that same resolve that we had previously, before 1994? We can. We've got the ability to do it. But the challenge is, let's not point fingers at somebody else. Let's ask ourselves, What am I, as a South African, able to do for my fellow South Africans to improve the society that I'm living in?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pandit Trikamji. Prof, welcome. I'm tempted to say ish. Because your text was read out as an apology here, and sorry for the ordeal that you've had to encounter so early this morning. It's always such an inconvenience. We are trying to grapple, Prof, with this idea of making a common nation. Issues of nation building. Can we have public values that we are all agreed upon? And perhaps once we have created this bare minimum, I mean, maybe for some of us it's easier because we still have our consciences intact. It might be difficult for those who have sold their souls to the other side, Amasela and all of these things. But how do we navigate this space? Are we able to say, if somebody says you're from South Africa, what is South Africa about? Everybody from the US, they disagree internally, but when they come out, you meet a person from the US, whether you are in London or you are in Australia, of all different characters, they keep that thing of America is the land of opportunities, and they're very arrogant about it. We meet them in conferences. But I'm not so sure what we project when we all leave this room and we are abroad to other people as a South African identity. Prof. Esak.
Thank you very much. Good day, everybody. And although I'm not responsible, but still my apologies for being late. Colleagues, 2 or 3 things. The first is that our anger and our lamentation about where our country is at the moment and how things have gone so dreadfully wrong in the last nearly 3 decades. All of those lamentations and those anger, it is completely in place. And at the same time, we need to remember that as a nation, it is an extremely young period. We are a nation that have only been created in many ways in the last 30 years or so. There was a good period before that, 2 decades or so, that we forged another kind of nationhood in the resistance to apartheid, but both in resistance to apartheid, but also in shaping amongst ourselves, what is this alternative country going to be? So the first phase was, who are we? And in this who are we, many of us found each other. For the first time in that period, did we really begin to forge a non-racial, not society, as much as a non-racial beginnings of a nation in our liberation struggle. Pandit Trikamji is one of those people who led from the Hindu community in this liberation struggle. But you will also recall that prior to this and outside this, there was, for example, Hindus and Muslims living together in many areas. Underneath this, there was also competition, rivalry, and looking down upon each other. And in this liberation struggle, we found each other in a new way. The same goes for the question of gender justice. In apartheid, for example, women weren't allowed to open shop accounts or any accounts in their own name. Religious communities had no space in the national curriculum, but amongst ourselves we forged that the place for women together as a part of the nation, not as second-class citizens, we began to appreciate the value of religious communities other than the dominant Dutch Reformed community, and then after that the dominant form of Christianity. So we did begin to form a nation in waiting, so to say, before the end of apartheid. So we are a very, very young nation in history. That's the first thing that I want to say. The second thing that I want to say is, as we examined, and we have done so in the last 2 days, the state of our nation, we've anguished about it, we've begun to think of what can we do to, in some ways, create even a new South Africa beyond the mess that we're in at the moment. In the middle of this, I want to say that it is important that, as we did, identify the different areas of tensions, the areas of anger, the spaces that we need to enter in order to transform our country. At the same time, colleagues, I want to say this, that South Africa remains a remarkable nation. When, in response to the question that was earlier raised to him, Pandit Trikamji said, what is it that, sorry, it was the chair, the moderator, who said, what is it that we can, this is a nation that does this. We from South Africa, in the way that other people may say, this is a land of opportunity. We are in South Africa, and this is a country that allows, and not just allow, but enable communities to grow in their own ways with a deep appreciation for the diversity of our country's different community groups. I have constantly said that as a Muslim, and here I can extend that and say as a member of a so-called minority group, and what I'm saying counts for the Jews in South Africa, it counts for the Baha'is in South Africa, it counts for every minority and majority religious group. Friends, believe it or not, I have been around the block. I don't want to take a boast, but to legitimate what I'm saying. The last time when I counted, I've been to 151 countries. And as a scholar of religion, I keep my eyes open. What's going on here? There isn't another country in the world where Muslims are as free to be Muslims as in South Africa. In South Africa, man, you can, and I was shocked when I read the census results this morning. Muslims are only 1.3% of the population. At the same time, you see them nearly everywhere. You see the recognition of their mosques. You see the recognition of the communities, the clothes that they wear. Whether it is in parliament or in business or in shopping malls, people don't give them a second look. They may be, oh my gosh, doesn't this woman get hot in this completely black garb and all these things? That is a thought that goes to their heads, to your heads. The same thought that goes to my head when I see women walking in high-heel shoes. Oh my gosh, how does this woman manage in these high-heel shoes? But I've got nothing against that woman. So you may wonder, oh my gosh, you know, this guy, he wears such a huge turban. How does he walk? When is he going to fall off? You may wonder, but you've got nothing against that. So people, that diversity and the appreciation of that diversity. Recently, our Deputy Minister of International Relations, he opened a conference, an international conference of left-handed people throughout the world, and the conference was held in South Africa. So that concern for the edges, even the left-handed people as an oppressed minority. So only in South Africa does this happen. And I'm not talking about sexual minorities, minorities, all sorts. So people, this is a country that we can sell. This is a country that we can sell. So, and then the last point or two that I want to make is this. You know, whenever we look at how we have cohered as a people, whether it was during apartheid, for example, in the struggle against apartheid, or whether it was against COVID, the one challenge that we have is that as a people, we have only cohered in moments of quote-unquote drama. So there's this immediate crisis in front of us. At that time it was apartheid, and we cohered. And then it was COVID. The challenge that we have is in the quote-unquote boredom of ordinary challenges.